Greetings, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to my good friend, Mark Nickel. Mark likes to refer to himself as a husband, dad, social worker, and a proud Gramps. Mark has an extensive background experience in community building, has occupied some time and space in the Cayman Islands, currently resides in the PEI. Not so much at this present moment as he's escaped a little bit of civilization into a camp area, enjoying the outdoors. Mark, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Mark, one of the things we discussed was maybe take a little bit of time and space and focus around some of the work that you do, Mark, around men's sheds, and have been a big advocate on that, including in the Cayman Islands, and its connection to the June Buddy Up Challenge, which is an initiative out of the Center of Suicide Prevention in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where it's recognizing the fact that the rate of suicide amongst men is 3 times higher than women. Now, I just want to make a statement off the record, and that is, when we lose someone to suicide, it impacts all of us. It not only impacts men, it impacts our partners, the people who are left behind, our children, our kids, our families, our communities, so on and so forth. So, but it is recognizing the fact that there's some stuff that we can do, and hopefully Mark will shed a little bit of light around some of the great stuff that has happened in the past, maybe a little history of background, Mark, and what we can do with an initiative like Men's Sheds and community building to move the yardsticks. Mark, over to you, buddy.
Well, thank you very much. Well, it's great to be part of this, and appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit what I've learned, and I think how the movement has developed since I think the first shed was in 1993, and actually was started in Australia by a woman who saw her dad really, he'd retired, he was kind of at a loss. Increasingly his social world was kind of shrinking. Like so many men, he got so much of his identity from what he did. And when you are no longer in those roles, those paid roles in an occupation or a vocation, we often are at a bit of a loss as to what we do. And I think one of the other things that we don't often talk about, but are increasingly starting to talk about, is as we get to that stage, as we're getting older, we're also understanding more and more about the long-term impact of trauma on people. But in this case, if we look at men, we know about epigenetic trauma, which is the trauma that's manifest in our brains, wired into our brains, and that's based on the experiences of our mothers, our fathers, whether that's to do with war, conflict, could be trauma from exposure to other kinds of vicarious kind of trauma things, and also the other part of it is adverse childhood events, and the body of research there is increasingly growing that finds a very strong correlation between bad things happening to kids and the long-term impact on their physical and mental health, to the degree to which, and it's a 10-point questionnaire, and if your score is 6 or higher, you statistically have a higher likelihood of a shorter lifespan. So I think that we've got the stuff that's already in our brain at birth, and then the kind of trauma and stuff we accumulate as kids. And then it's certainly in those forces, folks in the military, in first line responders, and other kinds of folks, and some who aren't in that, but just run into these kinds of things in the world. We get to that stage now where we stop doing what we've done, and that work provides community. it can. Work can provide community sense of identity or whatever. Just one sort of thing that pops in my mind. The other thing, sadly, that adds to the challenge as we get older is workplace bullying. And it happened to me, and it ended my career. I eventually got a payout and retired. But that, and as I talk to other victims and as I've delivered workshops on workplace bullying, that can be devastating because, back to what men get their identity from what they do, and not just men, but men in particular. And if that's taken away from you because of something like bullying, that really sets you up. You're already dealing with it. And certainly in my case, I had anxiety for years after this. It's now been 11 years, and probably for about 8 years, I lived with pretty severe trauma. So we get to that place, we're retired, and then I think one of the key things is we often, maybe our partner or wife or our partners is the social convener. So they're the ones that say, let's get together with Mary and Bill, or why don't you get together with your friends and go golfing or go fishing at the cottage or whatever. And if we lose touch with that, or our social circle starts to shrink, and it shrinks, we've lost our identity, as a military person, as a firefighter, as a police officer, as a social worker, and we spend a lot more time in our heads. And sadly, it's all to a typical behavior, which is we sit down and we crack a beer and we watch TV and we talk to ourselves, lots of mental self-talk, and it can kind of into a downward spiral. And to your point about the risk of suicide, I believe again that the men are less likely to attempt, but more likely to succeed at suicide, right? Generally over the ages, and I think one of the groups at highest risk are older men. And I think it's because, we lose capability. I was never an athlete, but I know people who were gifted athletes who were, they wanted to be drafted to play professional sports. And as you age, you get arthritis. You can't move as quickly. Maybe, certainly my brain is a little slower than it used to be. All those kinds of things can get us into kind of like, oh crap, can't do this anymore, can't do that anymore. And then again, we sit and talk to ourselves about that. And because it gets distorted and can get immobilizing, because then it's a mutually reinforcing thing. Well, no, I can't do that anymore, so we'll try. And I think in contrast, a lot of women are much more, I'm taking at, the seniors courses at the seniors college, or it's equivalent. I've got book club, so they're much better at that. Or I get out and I do walking. Some of the people I know in Charlottetown, there's a group of women that get up and they go walking at 5 a.m. Like, whoa, I admire it. Don't want to participate, thank you very much, but I certainly admire it. So, and I think this is where sheds have played a major role, because the other thing it's a characteristic, and it comes out of the literature, the writing on men's sheds, is men don't do well communicating face to face about, we do about how to fix the motor or how to coordinate a project or something, but in terms of sharing emotional stuff, sharing our vulnerabilities or whatever, we tend not to do very well face to face. But what they find is we do much better shoulder to shoulder.
Mark,
it's kind of like,
just to put things in context. So men's sheds. So when I would hear the sheds, it's that little place that my mom used to send me when I was really young, and used to grab wood and bring me into the house.
Gotcha.
So can you clarify what you mean by a men's sheds or a men's shed, and then
Perfect.
And then carry on with that spin that you were providing, Mark, around that.
Yeah. So you're right, because certainly a shed was a place where you stored wood, or the lawnmower. growing up in Western Canada. In the Maritimes, particularly in Newfoundland, and certainly in the UK and Australia, a man's shed was in the garden or out back, and that's where men often went to tinker, repair things, escape from, family, and again, the men's shed movement kind of built on that as a place to go, and but what they've added that's so different and important is with others. Because again, you can do negative self-talk and drink beer and be depressed on your own in your shed. Although I think often, we tend to avoid the things that give us pleasure. So even if being in the shed would give us pleasure, we tend to retreat from that, and we end up doing things really passive, like click, watch TV. And the last thing you should really probably be doing is, watching what Donald Trump is doing today, or whatever other, strange stuff that's going on in the world. So the men's sheds movement started as a place to have a shared workshop, if I may, bringing men together. The one in Miramichi, for example, they're called, I think, the Sawdust Makers. So it was about bringing men together to fix things, repair things, create things. And importantly, almost all the sheds I'm familiar with have a community service component. So the one in Arnprior, Ontario, that I visited last August, they were building raised beds for the community gardens. The shed we started in Georgetown on Grand Cayman Island, we very quickly got involved with the local animal rescue charities. And one of the big deals there is they found a lot of dogs that would be literally chained to a tree and left outside. Of course, there's no winter there, but hurricanes, snow, or not snow, rain, wind. And so we'd reuse materials and build dog houses, working with those organizations. And there's, a strong history of that, making picnic tables, all kinds of little crafts to benefit charities and those sorts of things. So there's that. It's you're doing something, and not everybody, but certainly maybe more so my generation. I'm just 65. We took shop. A lot of us, are handy, and so you can do that. The cool thing is you exchange gifts. I'm suck at electrical, but I'm not bad at woodworking and stuff. Grew up in a lumberyard, but we can exchange skills. We learn from each other, and I think an important part of shed life, as I've observed it and as I've read about it, is it really starts around the teapot or the coffee pot. So the first thing you do, and the Arnprior guys were great. I went there on a Tuesday last August, and the first hour or so is coffee and BS. And then people kind of drift off into the various workstations to do their thing. And an important part of sheds as well, and I certainly observed it there, is you've got a host. And in the case of the Arnprior shed, it was a gentleman who had joined the shed after his wife had passed away, a wife of 38 years, 39 years. And he lived up in the country, was a farmer, and all of a sudden, and he had a shed, literally like a big shed, 40 feet by something, and there was tractors in it and workbenches and stuff, but it was by himself. And, as he was grieving and trying to think through what to do next, he heard about the other shed and said, okay, I come here. And, he wasn't looking for counseling or whatever. He was coming, and then they had coffee. And then, you share your story. And somebody, maybe not right then, but maybe at another time, kind of says, hey, you want to go for coffee one-on-one, and you share. And that person, can say, well, this is what happened to me. And I think that's, it's a very low-key kind of support. You go for coffee, and you help people process the grief that comes from losing a partner, a child, friends, longtime friends, the loss of capabilities. You know, I used to be able to do that. Can you see that? I can't see this. Can you tell me what this says? I think that's a lot of it, and you build the community, and then as that community grows, there's also an opportunity because now we're continuing to age, of course, and stuff just doesn't work as well as it maybe used to, and that's an opportunity. And in some sheds, it's a more formal process where they bring in someone to talk about prostate health. Because again, that's something that men often, we tend to wait to go to the doctor. We see that women are much better about going sooner and therefore getting help sooner, which often leads to better outcomes. Men, because if you wait, surprise, surprise, there's that pain and the whatever, and you don't get checked out. By the time you go, it's that much worse. So the sheds provide an opportunity that at the informal level, and then in some cases it's a little more formal, to bring in workshops, information, prostate health, mental health is another huge one. And regardless of gender, I think it's not something we often talk about. I know in my family we didn't talk about mental health and the mental health problems my grandmother had as far back as the 1920s when she was hospitalized. You can imagine. And this is in rural Alberta in the 20s. There really weren't very many hospitals. And that only came up after my younger brother had attempted suicide. And then my dad kind of goes, oh, yeah, there's grandma. So now we know that there's a history. And then he said, yeah, then there was my depression in the 70s when you kids were in high school. So, that's important because, it could be there and we don't know. And we're just not quite sure, and it because we don't know what it's like, because we don't know, if we're just talking to ourselves, we don't know what it means and we don't know what to do about it. And other people can be there, they can observe, they can go, geez, Bill's looking different lately. I don't know, something's going on. So Mark, I think, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, that's excellent. So Mark, what I'm hearing, some of the things you're sharing today, is that if I caught the date correctly, plus or minus 1993 was when the first shed got launched out of Australia?
Yeah.
And a woman who was involved with launching that first shed. It has progressed really since, and at the end of the day, a shed is not, well, it could be. It's not that little building that we go to gather the wood for mom and bring it into the house.
No.
It is a gathering place where men can gather at a location. I know what my dad was a boat builder, so that was a boat shed where a lot of people would converge and build boats and have a conversation. But it is a meeting. It is a place where men can come together, and I'm hearing shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
Talk about starting off with that coffee pot and doing that social connection and feeling connected to a group of like-minded, be able to do things, maybe build things together, while at the same time it's a platform to be able to talk about, to be able to process things like grief, like the loss of identity of a job I used to do before, the loss of a child, the loss of a spouse, a partner, whatever that might be. I'm hearing quite a bit of a connection in there, Mark, as well, about trauma, and when trauma is not processed, maybe at an earliest stage possible, it will manifest and take on a life of its own and can run pretty significant havoc, including the impact on our mental health. And I find that it's so well connected to what we're trying, what the initiative Buddy Up is trying to do and trying to address, while at the same time, I know within the academy, where we're trying to not only support leaders and organizations, but also those who have been impacted by trauma, go through a life of addiction, recovery, possibly some individuals that get lost to suicide, and then those left behind trying to process that.
Yeah.
Mark, what do you feel is the next, if we had were to wrap up today, because I feel that there's another connection that we could have and have another conversation around this.
Mhm.
And love to be able to do that, Mark. But
Sure.
in this present moment where we just introduce it to the audience what a men's shed is and what the
Yeah.
concept is, what do you feel is the next step, Mark?
Well, I think, the model is working. I mean, what did they say? There's 1,200 sheds across Australia. About 50,000 men are directly involved. First shed was in Canada, was in Winnipeg, 2011. So I think, and in the Maritimes, we learned about the one in Miramichi. There's one called a tool library in St. John, Newfoundland. So there's a couple, but I think there's a model that seems to work well. And it's working well, and I mean, Ireland is just chock-a-block full of sheds, the UK, New Zealand as well. So looking at a place to gather, let's, get going on it. Like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Each shed can be a little different. Some sheds offer, culinary, they have some kitchen facilities, whether some sheds don't have access to power tools. We need to work better at how we manage liability, provide safety training, but also make intelligent choices about, saws that are safer, like a saw stop technology, which won't let you cut your fingers off in a table saw. So there's things that we can do. We need to learn from what's already going on. And the Atlantic Men's Shed, our little Facebook group there, I think is a way to do that, to reach out and see. And also, I think one important piece is, when we're trying to figure out how to be sustainable and make this affordable, you can have a community shed that has certain hours dedicated to men. I've talked to some groups that say, well, no, it just has to be men, but they operate 2 days a week. Well, it's hard to afford rent and utilities for any kind of enterprise that runs 2 days a week. If it's a facility that's a shed and you share the physical plant, then, Tuesdays and Thursdays, are guys, but we can have ladies' night, you can have unicorns on Saturdays, whatever. There's a lot of different things. There's an opportunity. Certainly the shed that we started in Grand Cayman is still there. It's Community Shed - Cayman Islands. We were small enough that we were just people. And we had men, women, coming in, and some people knew a bunch of stuff about this stuff, some didn't. But what we had is we were all open, and I think we all appreciated the community. And then as the community builds, that's when you can start to look at, because it may be as part of that informal coffee conversation, you go, is anybody else interested in, or, where I live, there's a real shortage of access to medical care. So maybe that's your opportunity to try and, approach your healthcare authority to say, would you come in and talk to us about X? Because individually, it's going to be much better if you've got a group of people and they say, yeah, we'll come and talk, because if there's 15 of you, and we can talk about physical stuff, we can talk about, mental health, first aid, what to watch for in terms of suicide assessment. If you're not sure about what's going on with George, what should I be? What are the questions I should be asking me and asking George?
Absolutely, Mark. Mark, it sounds like we could carry on this conversation for a very extended period of time, and I would love for us to do another connection, and we'll do it, let's say, Men's Shed Part 2. And as you had said, about to spread the word, to be able to know that, one, the concept of men's sheds is live and well, and that we can, in fact, get involved. And so as a community, let's build communities and do that. So Mark, if you had to take, let's say 30 seconds or less, and any closing comments, it's over to you. What would you like to share with the person who is watching this video around what was shared today in about 30 seconds or less?
Get off your ass. We need to all get off our asses and look around. And maybe it starts in somebody's Quonset or somebody's garage. Look to ally. You look for funding sources. Look for old workshop places, maybe that your city, your town may have a space they're not using. You look for other people to partner with in terms of getting the infrastructure. We certainly had no problem getting tools donated, but get it going, because that's the thing. You get a physical place, you get power and some tools and a coffee pot or a teapot, and start. And that's what you got to do. You got to get off your ass and get going.
Excellent. Mark, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for the viewers for taking time in your busy schedules to join Mark and I around the topic of men's sheds and Buddy Up, and what we can do collectively. What did I hear the words? Get off our asses and work together as a community to make things better for the greater good. Mark?
And reach out to people like the people are already doing it.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Have a great day.